Okay, let's bring this meeting to order. Community Preservation Act Committee meeting, Friday, January 25th. It is now 6:46. We're a little bit late, but we had to wait for some members to be here. So let's start right in on item 1, acceptance of previous meeting minutes, 11/26, 12/17, and 1/10. And I did have a couple of small things that I found on 12/17. I don't know if how do we go about, we've never corrected any minutes before, but I did, yeah, that's the only thing was on the first page there, just to correct accomplished stages and just cross off the rest of that sentence, because it's duplicate.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll put on that and I'll make a change.
Okay, on that, and then on the, no, that's the same one, where's my other minutes here?
So do we make a vote to amend it?
Oh, yes, yes,
So, or we could move to approve as amended.
yes, yes. Do you want me to go to the other ones first and amend those?
Might
and
as
do
well,
them
and
all
then we
at once?
can make
Okay.
one motion to approve them
I
as a
just had one
package
other
with the
thing. Where did
amendments.
I put 'em? Where are my minutes for 11/20? I know you gave them back to me.
I know the minutes from, I already mentioned the name of Sarah Myers-Ziegler was misspelled.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about her last name.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I also have two comments on those, on the November 26th, on item 5, the first bullet item. I wasn't sure what that meant. Do the contractors needs to need to abide by, or need to, I just couldn't make sense of that. And then further down the page, third from the bottom, Glow Tech. That's, I'm not sure how you spell that,
G-L-O-U.
G-L-U-O-U-T-A-K. So
yeah.
there's just a spelling there.
All right, I need another copy of that 11/26. Is there any more?
Are they-
I have this if you want.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
11/26 and the
Oh, yeah, right here.
12/17. I'll give them back to you after.
This is the 12/17, right here.
Okay, good.
This is your 12/17.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah,
I
this one
thought,
is.
I thought I was reading,
And this one is the 11/26.
okay, we're all set then here. Pass those back to whoever.
Ryan, that item 5, could that be, do the contractors need to abide by the mass prevailing wage law?
Okay, where are you looking now?
Probably, that's on.
It's on the second page, item 5, the first bullet item.
Of what minutes?
Oh, excuse me, the November 26th ones.
Yes, probably need to abide by the Massachusetts prevailing wage law, I think.
That would make sense. It just
Page is
doesn't. like-
Yeah. This is
Second
the
page, it's
second page of
item
the
5.
minutes from 11/26.
Oh, thank you, okay.
Yeah, that looks like it just
Yeah,
lost a word there.
got it.
No big deal.
Okay, and any other corrections to the 26, 11/26? Any other corrections to the 12/17? And then in the 110, I just had one thing, under item 2, on page 2, about 10 lines down, it says, Andrew did state that it would seem the committee right now is, it's like, that sentence, I don't think we need it, so you can, if you read that, did you find it on page 2, item 2, about 10 lines down, where it says Andrew?
Excuse me.
The one I have starts with item 3.
What's that?
The one I have starts with item 3.
That's not 110, the 110 minutes.
Oh.
The 110 minutes.
Okay, I guess I don't have that.
I don't either.
We don't have one thing.
Well, he passed those out the other night.
Oh, the other night, yeah. I have it
At
here.
Wednesday night.
Maybe that's the one with the misspelling for Sarah.
I have it here.
Is that the one?
With a misspelling for Sarah, I
Okay,
think, if you
yes.
look at
So we
that.
need to
And you can
correct that.
find her in the directory, so.
Yeah, oh, yes, yes.
She works in planning.
It's just to change the Y to H.
It's not just that, it's also, it's not Zippler.
It's,
not
oh, it's
Zippler.
not? Oh, I don't know about that.
It's not, and it's Sarah with an H, yeah.
Okay,
We just talked to you.
okay, all right. Okay, so anything else on 110? Okay, so do I have a motion to,
Yes, I move that we accept these minutes as a package and as amended.
is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for that. Okay, let's move on to item 2, which is a review of applicants' answers to emailed questions and requests for documents. And this is part 2, because we did part 1 the other night, so this is part 2 of it.
Okay, and I gave everybody a copy, so I gave everybody a copy of part 1, if you know, just gonna have that for records, and we're looking at part 2. So, the first one there is, the H.H. Richardson train station, the developer incentive from, the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority and, HG&E. Oh, no, actually, this one's not HG&E. I think that one was the oh, no, was this
This
the
is
one with
HG&E.
HG&E? I'm getting mixed
Yeah,
up.
no,
Okay,
it's-
it is.
you're right. No,
Okay.
it's Jeannie.
All right. So these are the answers to the questions. You can see them in front of you, and I can go through, but is 2 years a realistic period to complete this work? They emphasize that the 2-year timeline starts after a developer has been selected, approved by HG&E board, and due diligence completed, and a closing executed. I guess I thought, though, that when somebody brought up that question, that they kind of meant that even though it's after, is 2 years really is it realistic for
Yeah.
all that needs to be done?
No, I think I may have been one of the people who was asking the question, and what I was getting at, or trying to, was how long do they need the money to be kept available if no developer has come forward? You know, how long are we tying up funds without knowing whether they'll ever actually be drawn down on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that, I have a concern with that, too. I'm not thrilled about putting money aside and then not knowing when it's ever going to be used, if ever. It might not ever. And especially, as Marco brought up that night, that we don't know if, especially, is it the project, if it's viable. We really would need to know that first, if we're going to put money aside.
Yeah, I guess they're,
They don't want to do the work. You weren't here at that meeting, Mike. They don't want to do the work that we said, okay, we'll give you the money, but do the work. But they don't want to do that. They still insist that they would prefer for us to say, well, we'll spend $150,000 on the project when you get a developer.
Well,
It's like a developer incentive, and they still want to go with that, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
With the Richardson train station, although not, I think, the other two, the reason for that was at least in part that HG&E has already secured the building.
yes.
And, you know, Mike Sullivan's initial concern was that they hadn't, and it was going to continue to deteriorate. But since they did secure it and no further damage is likely to accrue, you know, they're looking for a developer incentive rather than let's secure the building.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're going through now was discussed in that meeting,
Yeah.
which we already had with them. But yeah, they're trying to emphasize that that they don't want any money, you know, issued to them until after the developer has been selected, but it still does, you know, bring up that issue of encumbering the money. And then in their next point, they said the timing of the development proposal is the main unknown in this project, and hence the subject of the monetary incentive. So I think I'd mentioned this before, that I wonder if they would accept a deadline for that, you know, a deadline for how much time they have to, you know, how long you have to find this developer, and if you don't find one within that set period, we're not going to keep, you know, holding on to that money for you, or you're not going to. So,
He
I
did
think they
say
would accept
too,
that.
he did say too that,
Yeah.
that they would be comfortable with us just, with not even allowing them to have any funding at this point in time, but that if we would just say, well, we'll consider it when the time comes, or he was a bit kind of vague about that, but I don't know what the exact wording would be on that, or how we would vote on that, or even, but he did say he would be okay with, if we said, well, when the time comes, you do find a developer, that he can say to them, well, we have a commitment, not a written agreement, but a commitment that the CPA will consider giving you some funding, so he said he would be okay with that, but that was kind of very vague.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Well, I think that was a fallback position. I think
Exactly.
What he would like to see, obviously, is for us to offer as much in developer incentives as he can possibly persuade us to give him. But if we can't, or if we just aren't comfortable with the process, I think his fallback is just, make it clear that these are projects that could be funded in the future if we came in with a developer who already was interested in the building, so that we could say to them, look, you developer who are interested in the Richardson train station, it is a reasonable possibility that the CPA will fund some portion of this with you as a co-applicant. But that would be, for future funding cycles, and isn't a problem for us right now.
I don't think I'm following. So he was saying that he'd be okay with just sort of a vague commitment without,
Well,
That was his,
I think okay with is,
not
our
his first choice, but
but-
his second choice, a commitment that doesn't specify how much the money would be?
no, he wasn't looking for a commitment at that stage, I don't think. It was more, do not say you're not going to fund this, because, which is something I think we wouldn't say anyway, because if, in the worst-case scenario, I think we are interested in encouraging development of all of these properties. And if somebody did come in and the city were backing them and saying, we will do X work on the train station, but there are these historical barriers and we can't carry all of the funding and we need your help to restore the roof or something, I think that we can fairly say we would consider it. We're not asking, or we wouldn't be, I don't think, being asked to make a commitment in advance. We can't.
Oh, okay.
well, anyways.
That's a fallback position. That's not something we have to worry
So
about
you
at
mean
this
if in the
stage.
future they got a developer, even though we hadn't committed funds, that maybe we would at that time?
Yeah, because
Okay.
we'll have other funding cycles.
Okay, all right.
But that was.
Yeah.
After we
I see.
consider
Okay.
the original.
So
request.
then, as you can see, is one of the questions was, number 2, is 150,000 sufficient for the magnitude of this project? And they emphasized that this would just be the incentive and by no means covers the entire development. But again, I thought that the question was more like, wouldn't that just be a drop in the bucket? Would that be enough of an incentive? That's what I thought, I interpreted the question as being, but they said this is their best projection for what an adequate incentive would be for a rehabilitation project at this site, given the resources at hand, et cetera.
Okay.
Not meant to subsidize the whole project, but I don't think anybody thought that that would subsidize the whole project, so.
No.
Amy, that being said, the 150,000 is an amount that they thought is sufficient to entice a developer.
Yeah, that's what it says
Yeah,
there. Mhm.
okay.
Yep. Okay, and so, and this, a lot of this is a review of the meeting, but I know I guess some of you weren't at that meeting, so it might be good. We had asked, or you had asked, what about an emergency intervention, like mothballing the building? Mimi already talked about that. And they said, as discussed in that meeting, the HG&E was effectively mothballed already, so, they say that the roof is not going to collapse, and doing extensive repairs at this time with CPA funding is not feasible or practical because those would either cost more than the resources available through the CPA, or in the absence of a full development project would be threatened by accelerated depreciation. This was a point that Marco was making, and they added, or vandalism over time. So if a lot of money were put into that, might not be the most practical thing. It would reduce the value of that work if it took a very long time, excuse me, to get a developer. Okay. For what would the cost of mothballing the building be? And again, I guess they had estimated, HG&E had estimated 1.16 million, quote, to replace the entire slate roof.
Yeah, but that's not mothballing. I mean, mothballing was just securing it so that no further damage would take place,
Right.
which they've done.
Yeah. But I guess she just wanted to add more information than what she already said. So, I mean, okay, so could we see a structural engineer report of the building? Maybe you brought that up, Marcos, yeah. HG&E does not have a structural engineer. So I'm just reading what we have in front of us. I don't know if this is, makes sense, but would it be better if we read this to ourselves and talked about it, or do you like my going through it like
No,
this?
this is fine.
Okay. So they don't have a structural report for the building, but the visual inspections don't show any failing structures. They need to replace building systems and roofs for reoccupancy. Or I guess they don't need to replace that. Okay, so number 6, can you provide information on actual costs? And then here you can see HG&E quotes to replace the slate roof in kind, which make up the amount I already said, 1.16 million, which is a huge amount. So you can see those bulleted items there. Goes on to the next page.
That's just for the roof, too. That's not
Yeah.
for the whole building.
Mm-hmm.
It'll probably be, oh, they have it there, yeah.
Okay, so number 7, has the HRA successfully pulled this sort of project off before using a developer incentive, and how did that work out? No, but they're staffed by planning office employees who have led projects to secure and spend, incentives for projects. And and then I've listed the different projects they've done that involved incentives. So they have experience with this, even though it's not, it's the same people, but for HRA. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm just
Okay.
nodding along.
Okay. And the staff is very accustomed to complex economic development projects, and they don't anticipate a problem with CPA funds, managing them or administering. Okay, on to 123 Pine Street Developer Incentive. So I asked, will you agree to a contract with specific deadlines for each stage of the RFP process to protect the city's investment, and this really could go for all of them, and prevent endless encumbering of CPA funds? They said yes. The timeline for redevelopment would be included in the purchase and sale agreement, and a revert or deed would be recorded at the time of the sale. But my question was, but what about a deadline placed on the HRA for securing the developer? I think that would have to be in there too.
Yeah.
2, is there another model other than the RFP Developer Incentive for these types of properties? They really believe this developer incentive model is the most cost-effective use of public dollars. And if the city did do a capital improvement like we were originally talking about, it would cost much more than providing this incentive, which sort of layers the financing.
Right, because the city has to use prevailing wages and all that kind of stuff.
And also, it's 1.16 million, it's a lot more than what was this, 150,000. So let's see, has this process of the has it been successful in the past? I may have asked that in an earlier question. They said it's similar to commercial tax credits at the state level and the housing development incentive at the local and state level, where developers get a tax credit that can be sold for cash at the end of the project. And their example is the Cubit building. That obtained several $100,000 at the completion of the project based on the Housing Development Incentive Program, which was locally approved. So, 4, would this funding request be used to create affordable housing? So I didn't know the answer to this, and I found out because it's a small building, this makes it unlikely, they're saying, that a developer would be able to secure affordable funding streams, such as low-income housing tax credits. They think the building would be more appropriate for market-rate housing, which there is a great demand for in the area, but they're not going to, preclude the possibility that it could be.
Amy, excuse me, And this, for anybody here, what would be the market rate? This is an aside, this question. For that building, what would be, does anybody have an idea of what the market, what would be the
Well,
market
that,
rate?
it would be
rent?
similar to what's right at the Royal Catholic, forgot what they,
Chestnut.
Chestnut
Chestnut.
Street
Yep.
What would, what is,
apartments.
what is though, I don't know those rents. What are those rents?
Well, I don't, I
One
think the
bedroom
last
or-
time
They have
Like-
studios, 1 bedrooms,
Yeah.
2 bedrooms.
yeah, about $900 to $1,200 a month, something like
be-
that.
yeah.
And that, don't quote me, but
No, that's okay.
At the time when they first opened, that's what they were running. So, that's market rate. It's
Does this-
working, it's working people, people who are working. You have to
Yeah.
be working to,
Do
to
do
be
you
able
think
to-
the location of the building and the building itself would command that kind of rent?
well, this one is even closer to the downtown, that one's farther up, so if they know, they would know. That this is their recommendation. Personally, I don't know.
Well, downtown is attracting, or at least Ward 4 is attracting a lot of new residents.
It has, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy. I mean, I just was a little apprehensive about,
So this question has me kind of pondering because I see the words, Pine Street, but I don't really know what the project is. Have I missed maybe a document that has like a photograph of what the building looks like and maybe floor plans of what the units look
Well,
like?
the
or-
attachments may have that, so you could come to the office to see, so you may not see that in, what's on the Google Drive, but you can certainly read,
So are
the apartment
photographs
units.
and
Yeah,
attached documents,
I
all that
believe
is
there
in
is.
that file? Because I don't know that I have time to look at all the files that are there.
Yeah, I know,
but-
there's
but-
a lot of attachments, yeah.
But I've got my big disadvantage is when we talk about the train station, I've seen it from the
Yeah.
outside a little
Yeah.
bit, but
Well,
I have
that's
no
why it
idea
would be
what.
good to go to a site visit for some of the ones that we're less familiar with. And I mean, either I could go and take a picture, or I could bring in the pictures they
I'll bet if you
provided.
Google it and go to
Yeah.
Google Images, you could probably find photographs of
Yeah.
the interior. But this just brings me to just lament a little bit that I don't know what some of these projects look like.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something.
Well,
and
maybe I
it
can
sounds
make
like
a
I
list
did.
of all the ones that we don't know what they look like and bring in pictures. So this would be one of them, and are there any others?
I mean, do other people have the same? Because I feel like we're talking about stuff, but I don't really know what it is. So when we start talking about market apartments,
You probably don't know what the Chestnut Street apartments look like for
I've actually
Valley
been to those.
Opportunity.
I've
Oh,
been
you have?
inside and I've
But
seen
not
the
everybody
chapel,
knows,
and
right?
Yeah,
those
the
are
chapel is
really
beautiful.
nice.
Not
So-
everybody knows, right?
Yeah,
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know the interior. and
Okay,
the
so
exterior.
not that one.
But that was only, well, wait,
What
when you
about
said
the
Chestnut, I
flats?
thought
You
you
all
meant
know
the
what the
one that was
flats
over
looks
in
like.
the park here?
Yeah, in the park where.
The ones that are newly
but the
renovated?
chapel is a separate building, yeah, the newly renovated ones.
I just don't
Yeah,
want to be
it's a good
a special case, but maybe there are
That's
other
okay.
members as well that don't.
Oh, that reminds me, you're bringing something up. Somebody asked me for the in-person meetings, which are happening next week, if there's some way that they can show a visual presentation when they're just talking to you. And I don't think there is anything like that here, is there?
In
PowerPoint?
here?
In here.
No, we could do that up on the fourth floor.
Right, I was thinking that maybe,
People, they just need to bring in
we've
a
got
laptop.
better images submitted with the application.
yeah, but nobody's gonna bring in a projector. I think we should do it on,
They've done
Yeah.
it before.
What?
I've noticed
Yeah,
that
people
building.
have
They do
brought in
that all the
projectors.
time.
they
building
bring
we're
their own
talking
projector?
about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have that.
I was thinking maybe we should just have it on the fourth floor.
It-
Anyway,
it
that's
might
another
be something
conversation,
that
but it
happens.
might make sense to have it on the fourth
Thank you
floor
so
so it'll
much,
be
Patricia.
easier for people, because
I'm bringing
everything,
a projector and a screen.
everything's there. They can
If they
set
could bring
everything
their own
up.
stuff, then we'll do
Yeah,
it here.
we can set up the projector and the screen.
We could even
And they
potentially
can-
ask one of, I'm sorry, Libby.
No, go ahead.
But we might be able to have some department donate a projector
And screen.
for the night, and then give it back.
That would be nice, because what if someone doesn't have a projector? They're at a disadvantage from all the other
They
applicants.
just have to have like the PowerPoint presentation to
Even then,
present
if we
it.
have 5 people with.
Well, they here, they would need to bring a projector, we're saying, or we have to
No,
provide
We
one.
can have somebody lend it, or
Okay.
I can bring
Or
one.
or the other alternative was to have it in the fourth floor annex, where they could set everything up there too, so.
So I think my statement might be a little late in coming because, as we deliberate and talk about, I realize I'm not in possession of as much information as is out
Yeah.
there. So I will go back in and take a look at some of these. It would have, again, maybe I missed it, but like I know for the community center in the flats, like I actually did some research and have some photos, and I
Yeah.
can point out,
Yeah.
here's why it's important to do this, or here's
Right.
what's important to
I
me.
could also try to, see if the attachments are available electronically. I could try to put them on the Google Drive. I'll have to see, though. If not, though,
So either being able to have here during the meeting,
Yeah.
a quick
Yeah.
review, and I think
Yeah.
that might help everybody visualize better, and
Right.
that might help.
It would.
well, I think it would be great if all the applicants brought a visual,
That should be a requirement, because as we're talking about these market rate apartments,
Yeah.
I'd love to see, well,
Yeah.
what does that building look like? What does the floor plan look like?
I remember
are these
seeing
real
also
apartments?
pictures of all the problems in the interior of the building, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that should come up front. When
Yeah.
you first get, and it sounds like it was already there, so I don't want to misspeak.
But it is kind of hard because, I didn't require them to submit all the attachments for everybody because that seemed like overly cumbersome. You'd be carrying this huge, heavy thing, you know what I mean? So there's only one copy with all the attachments, but I could certainly bring them in
Well,
for a meeting.
So I don't know what we want to do for this round, but for the future rounds, I think it'd be nicer to have, I personally like having more visual aids so I
Yeah.
can better understand. And when you see something, I think it's easier to think, oh,
Yeah.
maybe this is good, or maybe
Yeah.
this is a problem, or maybe this is an advantage, rather than just words on paper, which
Yeah.
when you're dealing with something that's so visual and so
Right.
concrete, and you don't have that, it's,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I could ask the applicants to bring visuals to the in-person meeting. And if for any, or I could prepare to bring whatever they gave me for the application, just in case, or something, I don't know.
And I don't know that it needs to be exhaustive, but, a photograph of what it looks
Yeah.
like, a floor plan. What is exhaustive is if a report has been done on the building, an assessment or a
Yeah.
project,
I
and
think
then,
there is
maybe it's
something.
a huge file. Maybe that's something that we can do in-house, and, as we start meeting and as we start reviewing this in the initial phases, maybe we could do a quick presentation here, maybe
There is some kind of inspection report, I think, of that whole, of 123 Pine
yeah,
Street.
so you wouldn't want to print out a 120-page,
Right, but I could bring
report.
one that we could pass around, yeah.
That would be helpful, even if somebody's looking at it while we're discussing, right?
Right.
And then we pass
Okay.
it around.
I agree with you, it would be good to have visuals. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so they're not seeking to restrict it to affordable housing, and now we're on to number 5. I asked about, because there's a community garden, and to do this work involves relocating the community garden, so I wondered if that would be a problem, and they said they've been in direct communication with Nuestras, I don't know, Raíces, about the relocation, and have proposed an alternative location across Pine Street. And they say that they have indicated, that the people running the garden, that they're open to that relocation. And see, number 6, has any developer ever responded to RFPs? What has happened? They received one response to the most recent RFP, but the estimated timeline provided was 5 years. That actually is interesting, because to know that, because maybe that goes back to that first question, is 2 years realistic, because the fact that they had somebody who said, but this will take 5 years, so they couldn't do it, So anyway. I guess this was for this particular one, maybe they were referring to. So after an evaluation of the roof from the buildings department, which found that the building was not in imminent risk of demolition, the board voted to wait to see if another proposal could complete the project in a more timely manner. So they continue to market the property and field interest for it. What would be done to the adjacent lots? This is mentioned in the application. They say it'll be used for parking and open spaces for residents. And there's a lot in the application about asbestos. So number 8, I asked about asbestos removal. Will that be part of the project? And they said they don't know, it's unknown. But it wasn't mentioned in the budget costs. I asked why the $150,000 award from CDBG did not work out. There was a mention of the timing of the project, and it seems like it was more of an issue of the fact that the federal government recaptures the funding after a certain period of time if a large percentage of the awards are not spent in a timely manner.
Yeah, and we were given to understand that part of the reason that Office of Economic Development is coming in and asking us for these funds is that we don't or wouldn't have the 1 year, if you haven't spent it by the end of the year, the funds vanish problem, which does
Right.
create real headaches for redevelopment.
Keep in mind that they actually are not the same as the office, even though it's the same people. The Holyoke Redevelopment Authority is a separate
Redevelopment Authority
entity.
is different from the Office of Planning and Economic
Right.
Development, but Planning and Economic
I
Development
see what
does
you're
tend to
saying.
oversee a lot of this
Oh,
stuff,
okay.
just because Marcos wears a lot of hats.
Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't seem like that was their fault, really, that happened. Because I've also seen that in other applicants,
Yeah.
people talking about the same issue. So number 10, have you successfully completed work with CDBG funds in the past? And if so, can you provide documentation, invoices? So yes, the Office of Planning and Economic Development has either led or been part of the team successfully completing projects with CDBG funds. And then they list different projects. Including a $9 million grant in MassWorks award. Okay. And this is sort of similar to earlier questions. Have they successfully pulled this off with a developer incentive? And their recent example is the Qubit project, which I think I mentioned already, so it was kind of a repetitive question. But providing a local cash developer incentive is new in that it grants money up front at the local level instead of at the state level. And it's already monetized. It doesn't have to be sold to a third party, I guess the way the tax credits do, so. Okay, so that's that one. And then on to the Holyoke Armory developer incentive. The CPC is currently interested in exploring the same arrangements for this property as for the train station above to preserve the building for later development. Oh, so this was about the mothballing thing again, I guess. And we asked if they could send a detailed budget for that type of rehabilitation. And they said they don't have estimates for this type of work and currently do not have the resources on hand to provide a pro forma development budget for CPC within the time frame. And the proposal itself is to obtain, oh yeah, this was, which we talked about at that meeting. The proposal itself is to obtain funding in part for the pre-development activity, the pre-development process in partnership with One Holyoke CDC. Because this is the one where they do have the developer who's interested. Mike Moriarty, I can never say his name. Moriarty, yeah, I don't know why it's hard. Okay. Let's see. So does the city of Holyoke provide site control of the armory for the HRA or vice versa? The city of Holyoke owns the armory, but the building has been approved by the city council for transfer to HRA. Most of the property identified in the urban renewal plan for redevelopment stays under city ownership until a development proposal has been approved. Sorry, I just have to remind myself of what I wrote here, just because it's so late. Okay, so I guess what they're saying with that first question is that to even come up with a budget for the work that needs to be done, that's what this money is, the incentive is for doing this pre-development activity, which would include figuring out what really has to be done, so. All right, so on to Voce de Esperanza, 348. Am I saying that correctly? Mm-hmm. Okay. 348 Chestnut Street, which is the same as 48250 Franklin. It's a different entrance. And 337 Chestnut Street. So The request is $50,000 for the 348 Chestnut, which would be historic rehab, and $50,000 for what I think falls more under housing preservation, because that's not a historic building, the second one. So are the units or the buildings currently deed restricted affordable housing? I asked, if so, can you provide documentation? And they said yes, in perpetuity for 99 years. And they did submit these many attachments for restrictions with the tax credits, DHCD, home affordable housing restriction, and HAP contract for Section 8 units. And they're in need of recapitalization. I can tell I'm getting tired. Deferred maintenance and structural issues with the project. So how will the project expand affordable housing? Because they had mentioned this in the application. Please clarify. And they said because these housing projects remain at risk as ongoing maintenance issues and will jeopardize its sustainability. And I feel a little nervous about how they're using that phrase maintenance issues, because CPA money is not really supposed to go toward regular maintenance. So the key point I want to call your attention to is whether or not proposed work on a modern building like 337 Chestnut is just maintenance or actual preservation of the building to prevent future harm to its structure. Because it's a lot harder to argue that, and you could get in trouble if it really isn't preservation. So that's because it can't just be rehabilitation. That wouldn't fall under historic, and it wouldn't be allowable for regular housing unless it was acquired through CPA funding, which this wasn't. This is already existing affordable housing. So are all these units currently inhabited? Yes, and there's a waiting list. So the need is great, and please clarify your intent regarding your funding request for 337 Chestnut Street, because it was constructed in 1999, and the requested funding would not be allowable, this is what I was just saying, for historic rehab, nor for support for affordable housing because of the work proposed, because that money doesn't go directly towards helping people, afford the rent. It may be allowable under housing preservation if the funds would go toward preserving, like I just said, the building structure from future damage, or housing creation if it is not already deeded for, but we know it is deeded for that.
So for preservation.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, that's kind of a tricky one. So they'd really have to prove that. So 337 Chestnut Street, that was the modern one built in 1999. And the work they want to do is new exterior windows and siding because of water infiltration. So I'm saying, well, can they provide us with a report that really documents water infiltration issue and the work needed to fix it? Because what I noticed, and this is really weird, I was looking at, they do have this capital needs study report in their application, and I thought, oh, look, it does mention, the windows and the siding as, repairs that need to be done immediately, and this report is from 2014. But then I discovered, oh, it's not even for 337 Chestnut. It's for the historic building. So we don't really have anything that they gave us that documents or, that this work needs to be done to preserve this particular building. It mentions minor repointing of brick mortar joints and exterior wet applied sealants to windows under building envelope concerns. Yeah, so I'm wondering, did they confuse those two buildings? The cost is about $200,000, and the $50,000 they're requesting, combined with the other funding sources they have, they're saying would mitigate this water infiltration. So the thing is, their original application didn't really talk about water infiltration. I think they learned through me that, this would be allowable if it is preserving the structure of the building, and then they sort of may have reworked this because it's different from the original, where they talked about lighting and other things, which I think this was the one that talked about lighting originally.
But you're right, unless they can show us that there's been a study done that actually shows that there is water infiltration that.
So we just have to go back to them and ask them for the documentation about what is allowable.
Yeah. And so then the other building, the historic one, they want to do masonry repair and tuck pointing. I had to look that up, and cleaning. And I'm not sure if tuck pointing falls under masonry repair. It looks like it's related. Maybe you know.
I'm not sure what tuck
I
pointing is.
think that's like putting the stuff between the bricks. I don't know.
That's repointing, because usually you have to remove the old grout mortar, and then you repoint by packing it back in. Maybe that means stuck? I don't know. It's a phrase I haven't heard before.
Yeah. So, of course, in the report, as I told you, they included a report that's only refers to this building from 2014. It doesn't list cleaning as one of the things that needs to be done, but I can imagine that could fall under a historic rehabilitation. It shows a zillion problems with the building, interior and exterior, and they also included problems with the elevator. And remember, this is from 2014, so this is already like 5 years ago, so it could be even worse now. So I had a question, because it's on the upper floor, there was something about the basement fire-rated ceiling that needs to be replaced, and I looked at the pictures, speaking of pictures, and there's just nothing there for portions of that ceiling. There's nothing there. So it seems like it would be important to know that that's been taken care of before putting more money into this building, because if that's like at risk of a fire, because there's not enough of that ceiling is supposed to be a barrier to stop fire. So I would want to know what's the current condition of the building now, 5 years later.
Right.
But they probably don't have the funding to do a new report like that, so.
This is go ahead.
Okay. So then I had mentioned that our records show that they owe the city money in taxes, 181 Elm Street, which is one of their properties. And they apologized, and they stated that they had misplaced the invoice and that the taxes were paid. They didn't say how much on January 11th, but then I called the tax collector, and she said, no, according to their records, $3,142.91 is still outstanding on that property.
But that's not one of the properties they're asking about, right?
No, it isn't,
No.
but I was looking into and working with, the city solicitor to see, like, do these people owe any taxes to the city? Because here, this is giving public money to these projects, and if they're in arrears, they should at least get on a payment plan of some kind before they're given, before the city puts a new investment into something like that.
But they're not asking for the.
No, they're not asking for anything for that property, but still.
I don't think we can stop giving them funding for properties that they're okay in, if they are, not in arrears.
Madam Chairman, excuse me, but it does reflect on the management.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is a debacle. We're not sure about the addresses, we're not sure of reports, we're not sure they owe money on taxes. Oh, wait a minute, we lost the invoice. Oh, really? I get a bad vibe about this whole proposal.
I do think that is important, because like when I know that when Alicia Zoller in the Office of Community Development, like when she reviews applicants for funding, she will look to see if they owe money in taxes. And we've talked about that also with the Glowtech property, and just.
Yeah, but it's related to the property, not some other property.
Yeah, but this is related because it's
management.
city. It's the city. If it was owed somewhere else, I would understand, but this is the city. They owe this money to the city. And here
And if it was for those properties, I would be concerned, but if it's for 181 Elm Street,
but they should at least get on a payment plan.
Well, that's, okay, yeah. Right, they should do a lot of things, but if it's
should.
not related to the projects they're asking about, I don't think, to me, this is my
Okay.
own
Right.
personal opinion.
And we have to also take into consideration that they just took over these properties not so long ago. The ones that they're putting the VOC, they just took over for these properties not so long ago.
Yeah,
Actually, when did they acquire them? I'm sorry.
I want to say like at least not even 2 years ago, they took over these properties. So that's why they're trying to preserve them.
So some of this probably or may well reflect attempts to catch up with past management's
Right, exactly.
issues. But
Which was Home City Housing was before them.
But I think regardless of all of this, part of this does go to we're investing taxpayer money here. Will it be well spent?
Right.
Right.
Will it be enough? I mean,
Well, that's what we'll have to
holy
find
moly,
out when
this
they
is
come in.
just, this is well, you guys. I've spread enough, but go ahead.
So I also asked them to provide a financial report, audit, or tax return for Valley Opportunity Council and Fosse de Esperanza. And the thing is, I realized, I don't know what, they did submit that, but the committee, you have to decide what criteria to look for, because there's, different criteria depending on the type of business, and, there's so many ways that it could be evaluated. And the city auditor, Tanya, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, the new auditor, she is willing to help and sit down with me, but she could do a debt ratio and all these different things. But she was asking me, well, what does the committee, because it has to be fair so that we're looking for the same things for each.
I was on the board for Valley Opportunity Council for, I don't know how many years, at least 12 years. And they were always financially sound every year, so I don't see why they wouldn't be now. I haven't heard anything that they're going under or anything, so. I mean, as far as the overall, as looking at Valley Opportunity Council itself, and they do that, they will pick up properties and try to save them for the city, or, as far as the city goes, so. I think that we should wait and hear what they have to say. Wait and let's get the whole story from them about how they came upon these properties and why they're doing it. And
Well, that is part of
I
why
mean,
we're
the
asking people to come in and
Valley
talk to us.
Opportunity Council itself is, I wouldn't be questioning
You wouldn't be
their
what?
soundness financially. I wouldn't question that, no. Personally, that's my own.
Yeah, that's my take on
And
it
like
too.
Boys and Girls Club, I wouldn't question them financially.
Yeah, but I think that if we just say, okay, this person's always been great in the past, I don't know if that's really creating a fair criteria for all the applicants,
Well, if
'cause there
you're
might
gonna
be
ask-
something you've never heard of, and then you give them a harder time just because you haven't heard of them, and that maybe somebody in the past who's always seemed great, things still change from moment to moment. So I just think we need to create a criteria. to help
Unless we're
make the
gonna ask
decision.
them all for all their, are we asking every?
I did already, yeah.
Oh, okay, well, if we're asking them all, then that's fine.
But I just need, wanted to get, sort of put it into your mind to think of some basic criteria of what you would look for.
Well,
We don't know
and
that, we don't know, we'd have to see it. We have to
No,
see.
you have to, it doesn't, if I handed you like a 50-page report, that's not gonna really
I don't
help.
want you to do that.
Right, so that's why I'm saying if you can
Yeah.
figure out what basic criteria to look for, I could work with the auditor and also
Well,
Mimi
as long
mentioned.
as they're not in debt and, not,
So part of the problem with the criteria is, I take your point about we need to be even-handed about this. We cannot be awarding funds on whether we like the applicant or not. But every one of these projects is different.
Yeah, that's
And,
true.
yeah,
they all have things that make them distinctive,
Yeah.
that make it, you're asking for a criterion to compare oranges and
That's true.
mulberry leaves. And I think at least until we get up and running, we may just have to, there's some of these, like the developer incentives we could look at next to each other because they're doing the same sort of thing. But a lot of these projects, I think we just have to look at in semi-isolation. I think the basic question of, all right, is this going to fall apart before the money is spent? That's important. Are we going to be making a material improvement in something if we award the funds? As with the Boys and Girls Club, that's important. We need to not be throwing money away, but I'm not sure that, given what's in front of us, we can put together a set of standards that we can
Okay.
apply to.
to each and every one.
Or
you
just
never
any
have.
kind of pointers on a red flag, or,
well,
would just be
as
good,
long
since
as
we
they're-
did ask
If they're
for
not
them.
in debt, that's.
Well, I think, I may be able to be more clear for when we get to MIFA, where I have, it's a great project, and just looking at the response we got today, to the extent that I could go over it, I can see where maybe there's an issue about whether the project is even doable, whether they've thought through these financials. And if it's not doable, if the financials don't make sense, or we don't have assurance that the money will be or would be used to make a real improvement in something, then we come back to do we want to tie up our funds this way?
Yeah.
And none of that even, that's not a final judgment on the project. That's just, we need to think about this before we award funds for everybody. Can you do it? Will it make a difference?
That's where I would repeat what I said maybe last meeting and the meeting before. It's so hard to understand when there's a shopping list of we'd like to do this and that and the other. Who's prioritized those needs? Who's determined what's in, what
and
is
I think
the true
when we
need?
get there, because, as I said last meeting, I think right now we're just in we've asked questions, we're asking more questions phase instead of we're evaluating projects phase. But I think we may just have to pass on a bunch of these because this funding cycle, we don't have enough information and it's not clear enough what people want to do.
So can CPA funds be awarded to an organization to commission a report on the state of the building, an assessment? Like I know
CNA, critical needs assessment.
Yeah, that'd be great, a CNA.
Yeah.
Or, the capital needs report is also important, but I think that would allow us to have a document that when somebody's asking for money, it's backed up by, a report by a registered architect or engineer or some professional. And that it's not just somebody because when you were mentioning the repairing the fire separation between the basement and the upper floor, just tacking up some drywall isn't. I mean, it's part of the response, but there's a code compliant part of the response that should be done. We shouldn't do
I wonder
things.
whether that should be a whole separate application because, one of the interesting things to me that came out of that discussion with Marcos the other night is he was very enthusiastic about the mere possibility of getting an actual grant to do that kind of needs assessment because that kind of money is apparently difficult to come by. And maybe instead of asking people to come in when they don't know what they're doing yet with a request for funding for they aren't even sure what, we could be next cycle telling people maybe you should apply for some funds for a needs assessment.
Right, because then the next time around, they apply again, and we can refer to the needs assessment to determine, what we feel like, either qualifies or...
Although I also, as Amy knows, because I've been waving my hands at her about this, I'm a little concerned about spending money on things that may not turn out to be CPA fundable once the needs assessment is done.
Right, exactly.
That's the issue, too.
And I think that,
I would love to get some
when they
confirmation
come
from
in,
Stuart about that sort of thing.
yeah, when they come in to that we talk to them, we need to talk to them about this stuff. We need to say, do you have a needs assessment? How did you come about
Well, there is one
deciding-
report, which I mentioned here, but it's
deciding
for
what you
one of the
wanted
buildings,
in your
yeah.
project? How did you get to these conclusions that
Yeah.
this is what you want, So that's what we'll have to talk to them about.
Yeah, but this is a learning process for everybody. We haven't been able to be clear with applicants about what we needed to say. So of course they're coming back with the stuff that's all over the map.
Okay, so just basic questions here. I'm down to number 7. Is VOC a private nonprofit? Yes. Started with community outreach. They now own properties in Chicopee and Holyoke. I just wanted to clarify what's the distinction between Valley Opportunity Council and Voce de Esperanza. And VOC is the nonprofit organization and partner with the other one, and it's the manager of Voce de Esperanza. And the 2 buildings are owned by Voce de Esperanza, which is why that's the name of the project.
Well, then actually, they should be coming in to.
Yeah. I think it's
That's-
really the same people.
Is it?
But they have to have a separate name. It was explained, but I can't remember it all. They
Okay,
had
well,
to
we'll
have a
talk to
separate
them
name.
about it
Yeah.
then. Okay.
Why separate name? Okay. So, which of the recommendations for repairs are the ones to be done with CPA funding? Now, this was odd. They said their experience and understanding of CPA is that the funds allocated to a project are fungible. Is that the word? That they can be used.
Fundable, F-U-N-D-A-B-L-E, fundable.
No,
No, fungible, as
F-U-N-G-I,
in-
like
Yes. no, money-
fungible.
Yes, as can be exchanged.
Right.
Money is fungible because you can move it around. A dollar here is the same thing as a dollar there.
Oh, yeah?
So they thought
Never heard that
that
before.
it could be used for any part of the project, either soft or hard costs. I don't think so, no.
No.
The whole point is we want to know. Anyway, so I was, surprised by that because, of course, I'm asking them which of these repairs are the ones to be done. So
Yeah.
that sort of should be a clue that I want to know. They said if they have to pin down how funds will be used, they will do as already described, which was number 4. 348 Chestnut, the historic building, the masonry requirements, adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. And they did quote from this thing, where preservation brief, number 2, repointing mortar joints in historic masonry buildings, which is in there. And then the 337 Chestnut, the more modern building, new exterior and siding and windows because of what they're saying is water infiltration. They said it will mitigate it. So that just means make it slightly better, but not necessarily stop it. So I asked for the photos for attachment D in their application. They've now submitted that. So I do have photos for this one, but not with me right now, of some of the problems. So I asked them to submit a timeline specific to this project. They said once they receive a tax credit award from the Department of Housing and Community Development, and they close on the financing, the closing on the financing occurs, and the project construction will start. See, so they're asking for this specifically so they can get a much bigger grant from DHCD. So the timeline they gave here is later than in the application. Originally, they said it would start January 2020 and end December 2020, but because they found out after they submitted to us that they found out that they are not they're not invited to submit for the other grant until February 2019. That means that this project would have to happen later. It would go from January 2021 to December 2021. So that's also not as good because it's more in the future. But I do understand what they're saying about why they need this in place. They need like local funding so that it's possible they'll go on and get this larger chunk of money. So
As long as they use the funding for what our part of the project and not, because I read
Yeah.
about that. They have to make sure that when they do have 2 grants like that, they have to be very clear on what money is spent on what.
well, that's what
And
I
make
was
sure,
wondering, and I
yeah.
put that in here. I said, would they agree to a contract that stipulates that the CPA funds must be returned? Because if they're saying that they can't do this work without the larger grant, maybe we could have in the contract, you'll have to return that money if you don't end up getting the larger one. So,
Unless the money would cover what they requested it. for.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I said this means the CPA would have to encumber $100,000 until February of 2020 for this project. But they do seem in a bind since they need that money to have a chance at this funding. So yeah, my question was like you're saying, Elaine, if they don't receive that funding, will they be able to go ahead and do the listed work with the CPA award only? And would this be a good project for CPA in that case, since there's such a huge list of problems, including structural ones for 348 Chestnut? What if the building has to be vacated, or demolished for safety reasons after the historic rehab work has been done? That's what I'm concerned about, if they didn't get that later grant. So it would be, again, like encumbering money. Maybe
Yeah.
that's what a lot of CPA communities have to do, though. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so 12, please provide specific information on a project you completed similar to this one. And they said the Kendall Building from 1925 in downtown Chicopee. They replaced the roof, windows, brick masonry in 2017. The total cost was $6.8 million, not including the soft debt, with construction at $4 million. And they used a combination of funds from different areas, so I know this is going on, but number 13, you need over $13 million for this project, which includes a long list of repairs to do on both buildings. How will you get it? If you get the CPA money and don't receive, this is what we were just talking, if you don't receive additional funds, what will you do? And they say, well, this is a common type of low-income housing tax credit rehab project, and it's typical to undergo a few rounds. I guess they've tried to get this money before and, haven't received it, but they're saying that that's a typical thing, according to them, but that having these local funds from CPA, from this committee, would be a critical aspect. Right. Do with that. So 14, can you secure this funding within 6 months? Because it's likely that this will need to be stipulated in our contract and that this must be in place before you were, I guess that's what we were thinking before. They said, no, not possible. I've already explained why that's not possible.
I think we've covered this.
Yeah, sorry. It's like I'm not really sure what I wrote here. Okay, I'll go on to next, number 15. Why does the project budget state the total? There was a sort of mismatch in numbers for number 15 that stated the total is $9,500,000 something, whereas the cover sheet says overall project cost $13,907,000. And they said that's because the overall project includes the existing soft debt. And that comes from loans and various sources that don't have to be paid back as long as the project remains affordable. And they intend to renew and extend those loans for this new project. So what funds have they already secured? I just want to make sure we know about that. We asked them.
Libby, does your father still live there?
Yes,
Yeah.
he
So,
does, although the units here that are that are proposed, his unit is not part of it for the renovations.
Well, I was just going to suggest that you give a letter to the city clerk's office stating that your father lives there and that there's no financial benefit to you
Right.
or to your family or
Right, he lives there with a Section 8
cover us,
voucher.
just to cover
Yeah.
us. It's just very simple and that they have that on file.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have down here, I was hoping that Libby, you or somebody could help me review this application, because it's complicated, and to understand, what money they actually have. So it would be nice to have another pair of eyes to look at it with me.
Could I make a suggestion now? Are we all done with Bose de Esperanza?
Yeah, we're pretty much done with that. I just want to mention that. These are the attachments they included, but one of the attachments wasn't actually received. The construction cost estimate there, but go ahead.
That, we have 2 projects left and it's almost 8 o'clock.
I know.
We should maybe adjourn this meeting to, continue. Can we do these 2 some other night or?
I don't know.
How many
I
more
don't
nights have we
know.
got?
We don't have other nights. That's the problem.
Well, Libby, do you still have to go?
Well, okay, I have somebody, I'm trying to set a ride for her while we're doing this. So I
Oh.
might have somebody that can bring her.
Oh, okay.
My
Well,
house.
I think
All right.
if it helps, I don't know if anybody else had a chance to even begin to look at the MIFA submissions,
I
which
did, I
spent-
looked at it today. Yeah.
But I think that we are going to need, I think it's worth having a few minutes of discussion, but I think we're going to have to go over this really carefully because there are, easily, quickly identifiable problems with these submissions. And we can't discuss them all tonight, so that should be a nice, fast discussion. And the same may be true of the other one. The response from Mr. Moriarty suggests that they're looking for things for that project that are outside our scope. Very little of it seems to have to do with exterior architecture.
I actually have a couple photos to show so we can see what he's talking about, if that's helpful.
You know, I will respect the
For
will of the
tonight?
group happily, whether we want to go on or not, but I think that we can probably usefully accelerate those last two if
Okay.
we go on tonight.
Yes,
One thing too, I would just assume post the meeting for next Tuesday, or next Wednesday, if that's still the plan.
yeah, yes, before we adjourn, we will definitely,
Just
Yeah.
yeah,
And
definitely.
if anyone's curious, I found tuck pointing, and it is the coolest thing ever.
yeah, different mortar, right?
Oh, yeah, it's different mortar, right?
Yeah.
Different
it's-
colors, I forgot that. yeah.
Okay, so what's your pleasure on,
Yeah, what are we
on
doing?
these two?
What do you,
How do we accelerate them, Mimi?
Okay. Well, the MIFA project, one of the things that jumped out at me as a result of our questions is, I mean, you may have noticed in their budget, they depend to a great extent on these historic tax credit financing. You know, they've got some money from the state, they've got some money in tax credits they can sell. It is not clear, based on their responses, that this tax credit financing accords with their project as it now exists. The problem being, I mean,
you can turn to page 8 and see, I actually put your name there, Mimi,
okay.
the top of page 8.
In the middle of their original application, there's a whole chart prepared by one of their engineers or designers that talks about the interior of the building and the various problems that they've encountered and how they expect to deal with them. Among the things that pops up there, if you've taken the time to look through it, is the murals, which they'd mentioned. And their application actually says that the murals are in such terrible condition that it is impossible to restore them. So, you know, what they propose is that they'll just take them down and they're going to, if everything goes their way, do a whole lot of reconfiguration of the space where the murals originally were. So one of the questions Amy asked was about their murals and whether they still intend to restore them given this report. And the answer not only said, yes, we expect to restore them, but it said the state and federal tax credit depend on their restoration. Now, that's $27 million of their financing is in those historic tax credits. We obviously have to get that clarified, because if their plans have inadvertently blown the qualification for their tax credits, I'm not sure that their financing is still viable for this, and they're going to have to think that through. And my point about this is that because that's such a howling red flag, there may be others in their application and in their responses. And rather than ask Amy to walk us through what we've got tonight, I think it makes more sense for us to go back, you know, take the weekend or whatever, for at least a few people to really go over this and try to come up with more questions where we can get them to narrow down anything about the viability of this project. And I feel terrible about this because I love this project, and they presented it to the planning board. The planning board approved their site plan the other night. It's beautiful. It would make a great deal of difference to the city, I think, if this really could, you know, if their vision for this could be executed. But this is a lot of money they're asking for from us, and you know, just as with other projects that I'm not sure are genuinely viable, it's a lot to tie up if this just isn't for, you know, because this hasn't been gone over carefully and the money isn't there. So I would suggest that we bring this up again when people have really had a chance to look at it.
To look at the application?
To look at the application, to look at their responses, to think about whether there are, you know, other potential problems that don't jump out as clearly and immediately as this did. And to the extent anybody knows anybody with expertise, if we can get other help reviewing it. You know, that's a lot to do in a few days, but I think it may be more constructive than sitting here tonight and fretting about it without anybody having had the time, since this just came in this afternoon, to go through it in depth.
Okay, so is that the committee's pleasure, that you want to read the information that Amy sent us this afternoon? And then we'll have to come back and have a discussion again.
Yeah, I think it would be good if everybody, because I feel like here I'm just sitting here reading you what you can read to yourself, but of course I did do it in kind of a shorthand way, so, if you had questions, you could ask me, but,
And obviously, anything else that jumped out at anybody here, I don't mean to foreclose anybody else's
Yeah.
comments.
I wanted to mention one other thing that sort of jumped out when I asked on the bottom of page 8, let's see, let me see if I can look. If their financing would be unaffected by the discovery that the interior fixtures, wood paneling, et cetera, have been destroyed by mold, and this is very documented, Mimi mentioned, mold, water damage, all this. And, Mimi had framed this question to say, can we see a legal opinion confirming that, this work could still be done despite all this destruction, this historic rehabilitation? And all she basically said was, yes, the work will meet the U.S. Secretary of the Interior standards, et cetera. And then she cut and pasted the website from the National Park Service tax incentives, which explains that it's required, has to meet these qualifying goals of, for historic rehabilitation. But that still doesn't really say whether it's possible, So I'm wondering if she can submit some document proving that that work is even possible.
Yeah, and this is a case where, because they've got all of this tax credit financing, you'd think they would want to confirm, if there's any question at all, whether their tax credit financing is affected by this. And it may be that she just made a mistake about the murals, and
Yeah.
the credits are still good despite this. It's just,
Well,
the
don't
documents they
forget-
have
yeah.
raise a big question.
Don't forget that I think we need to keep in mind that even though we may give them funding or write up an agreement that we're going to give them funding, they have to accomplish the actual project and give us the invoice that it's been done. So if they can't do it, then we're not going to pay it because they're,
Well,
you know
but
what I
they're-
mean?
Yeah, no, that's true, but there are
Yeah.
two issues here. One is the completion of the project, because if we give them, say, money for a few specific targeted sections of it, and then the whole project fails in the middle
Right.
because the financing has failed, that is money that we will have legitimately spent under our contract that nevertheless is a dead loss. But the other is the same one that we have with the developer incentives. It's just
Yeah,
tying up a
exactly.
significant
Tying up
portion
money.
of our.
This is it, because they're
Yeah.
not going to do anything for 3 years. According to this, they need 3 years of funding, so.
Well, I think that they want to move as quickly as possible, which is why they went in for site plan, and we would all
I
love
think
them
they
to.
just want us, just like Marcos does, he wants us to say that we're willing to give them $100,000 a year for the next 3 years, but we're not giving them anything until they accomplish the work, and they give us invoices. So if it ends up in 3 years they can't do the project, well, we'll have that money still because it's not going to have been given out. So, I'm just saying, let's not try to, I don't know.
Yeah, but I totally get your
The
point,
committee
like-
has to decide whether you want to tie up our funds in that way, just like for the.
But also, if it ends up that the larger goal of the project can never happen, and this chunk of money goes towards something, and then the whole project can never come
if
to
they do the
fruition.
murals and then they can't put them up?
Right, they can never
Yes.
really actually complete the project, then what good? That'll be a loss of public money and a lost, a bad use of.
I don't think they'll do the murals if they'll know in 3 years if this project's going to happen or not, so.
But it's already been 9 years, and there's only
16.
But this is the end, this is the supposedly the ending of the final picture
Yes,
here.
at any rate.
But, your point is well taken. We definitely, and we'll have to get some kind of insurance from someone. I don't know who. They'll either have to provide it, or we'll have to find someone to provide it that,
Yeah.
that they're, I don't know if you want to get somebody in here from the tax financing credit people or whatever to.
Well,
to
I'm
say
not
if
sure that
this
it's
is-
our job to be doing that kind
Well,
of due diligence
exactly.
for them, but they need to know, their project depends on this. Because if I'm reading their plans correctly, they intend to do a lot of, they can't restore the original theater. The interior is just gone, they're replacing it. They'll restore anything they can, but there's not much that's restorable.
Well, anyways, okay,
Anyway.
so let's move on.
So-
Okay, so
Yeah.
can I just point out a few things for the next one, and we can?
Yes.
And you can read it on your own. Everybody really should read it, the full
Yep.
thing more
Yes.
thoroughly. But for One Holyoke CDC, the Flats Community Building at 43 Canal Street, I just wanted to point out, like on page 10, that they don't, they say that they don't have a start or end date, because they just need funds and donations as they become available to address the building issues as they go along. And it will be an ongoing process of, different upgrades. And so there's not a defined rehabilitation project with a start and end date. So that struck me as kind of problematic.
There we go
Because
again.
what if that took 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
There'd have to be a limit. It could tie up money once again.
Yeah,
But then they also say further down, all CPA funds requested should be expended in the calendar year 2019. So that seems to contradict that, because they just said there's no timeline for the project. So I'm wondering if they mean the overarching project or the specific
that's
portion of the
probably what they
CPA,
mean, yeah.
or maybe they meant that, so I don't know.
but we can find that out when they come in.
And then on page 11, on number 11, I said, what if historic rehabilitation ends up costing more than $55,000 or more than the money received? Would they go forward with this project? And they just say that they're very committed and there's no going back, but I don't really know how they'll achieve that.
Well, see, this is the same thing again, where they want money to do a part of a project, but
Yeah.
we don't know if they'll
Right.
ever finish the project or be able to finish the project.
One thing
so.
I like, though, is that they're saying that they're already using it. They're using the building and, and it's a community building that,
They're using it, I'm part of the board, so, for them.
Yeah.
So they are using the building and establishing like community.
right. So it already has some
Yeah.
kind of use going
Yeah.
on, and, but then then on the last page, they said that they anticipate 3 to 5 years beyond 2019 of incremental activity. So again, I'm wondering, why did they say it ends 2019? Now they're saying it goes beyond, and what part of the project are they talking about? Oh, and then the last thing, this relates to the John Tanzi Maple Street project, which we discussed in the last meeting. This is totally unrelated to what I was just talking about, but he happened to call, and I have a note here, to tell me that he plans to be in Nicaragua between February 15th and about April 7th or so, and he was wondering if that will be a problem. He says he could communicate via email. But the thing is,
Skype?
I remember
No.
before when I tried to communicate with him via email, and he said that he was in Nicaragua. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm
he'll be
thinking.
here, is he gonna be there for the February 13th
Yeah, he'll still be
hearing?
here for those main things. However, I do
Yeah.
think there's a lot of negotiation, and plus, who will sign the contract if he's not here? That might be around the time when
Yeah,
the
exactly.
contract has to be signed by a person,
Yeah,
so.
right.
Okay. So
But he's still not definitely the owner yet anyway, so.
Right.
can
So
I
I just
just
wanted to let you
back
know.
up to the previous project for a moment here? Because I think, particularly since we have a board member here,
To the Flats project?
the Flats project. I was struck by the first part of the response where we asked about whether this was, or how this was a historic district. And the answer was, and I quote, it is historic in several aspects. It is our intention that it remain an active space, inviting to all Flats residents. This, first and foremost, is historic preservation in its purest form, looking beyond bricks and mortar to engage the neighborhood by preserving its interior use, hopefully for the next 72 years. Now, I think that part of what's actually being requested is for the exterior and preservation that we can cover. I think also although I salute the creativity of that sentence, I think preserving the function of a space is probably outside the scope of the Community Preservation
that's a
Act
good
and its
point.
funding.
Exactly.
And therefore, if whoever is responsible for this application wants to tighten it so that it is specifically addressed to the stuff we can fund, that would probably be very helpful.
So I have something to add to that, because I did go to Macris and looked up the address and couldn't find anything. And it's also not specifically registered on the National Register of Historic Places. Although apparently it's part of a district that is listed, it's not specifically
Yes, it
named.
is.
Yeah, right.
And this is an example of where, because I was assigned this one, I thought, I don't know anything about it. So I have some photos here, and I want to speak to the plaster, the stucco finish, because I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know that you're all going to be able to see,
Well,
but this is
pass it
the,
around.
so this is the building. I kind of want to lay them out. So this is one end of the building. This is a sort of three-quarter view from the other side. This is the building here, and that's the building next to it. And this is the other end of the building, and then the end view of that. And this is a roof plan. So I think the important thing of that building is that it was part of a row house of buildings. You can see it's one after the other. You can see on the site plan. And when they went in and did the plaster, they took out the dormer, they took off the porch, they took out the chimney. You can see how this facade doesn't look at all like this facade. So in his statement where he says that, I mean, I guess it is historic because it's from 1946, but to restore an item that is extraneous from the rest of the building, yes, it does set it apart.
Well, do they want to restore it so it looks like
Right.
this?
But this is brick.
Well,
These buildings
Are
are
the
brick
bricks
buildings.
underneath?
The brick is underneath the
They
plaster.
want to restore the plaster.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it
they
basically accentuates and improves the
You're
thing
saying-
that makes it non-historical with respect to the original construction. Now,
This is particularly striking because, like you're saying, it's part of a whole row of
look, you-
buildings that are
Yeah.
clearly
Yeah,
a
you can
different style.
that's it right there. And you can see that all these parts, this is all one row house. They all look the same. They all had dormers, they all had the front porch. You can see it, but then you
Yeah.
can see the big block of.
I mean, if that was just on its own, you could say, oh, yeah, it's 1946, et cetera, but the fact that it's part of that whole row of buildings.
So in this particular case, who's to judge what's historical or not? I mean,
we might have
I
to
have
ask
some.
CPA, we might have to find out from,
You guys.
You mean the Conservation Commission?
Conservation.
not conservation.
The Holyoke, I had
The-
tried to get some
the Historic
information from
Commission.
Holyoke Historical.
Well, they did give a
Commission.
letter. Well, it's part of, they did admit it's, or not admit, they'd said it is part of that district, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't want to argue that it's not a part of the district.
Right.
I guess what I would argue is, has enough research been done
Right,
to
I agree
say
with you.
that restoring the plaster is the best way to make this building, to restore it, to make it more historically correct?
That's
Or
historically correct.
Yeah.
you know,
It's not historically
My
correct.
guess is they would have to ask for a lot more money if they were going to
Hell of a lot
restore it
more
like
money.
the others, you know?
Hell of a lot more money.
And I don't want to knock the purpose of the
Mm-hmm.
building, because I'm sure it has lots of great things. I'm only looking at the bricks and mortar saying to restore, yeah, so
We
I
might
think
have to
you all
go
get
to
my
the
point.
Coalition and show them the pictures. and
Sure.
say,
You mean the Historic
Coalition.
Commission?
No,
Oh, the coalition, okay.
yeah, CPA Coalition.
Well, it really comes down, they will say it comes down to your local,
Yeah, no, I think this is a judgment call, and
our historic commission,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they're gonna have to take it up and let us.
Yeah, I think that we should write a letter, or you could write a letter, you know, or convey to them that we'd like you to come to our meeting and, you know, look at this or something, or
So
attend.
I can certainly coordinate with the Holyoke Historical Commission
Okay.
and see if I can get some kind of an opinion or statement, or maybe
Great.
there already is one.
Okay,
Well, we
good.
just have the letter, you know, confirming it's part of the district,
and-
but this would be more, what you're looking for,
What
yeah.
has been your experience? I mean, if you got a, excuse me for interrupting, Amy, I'm sorry. If there was a state historical person, they would say, historically speaking, in conjunction with the rest of the neighborhood, that's it. That's not it.
Yeah, so, historic preservation is, like, there are periods of time, because buildings, because they
Yeah.
transform, they change, they modify. You have to pick which is the
Yeah.
epoch in which you want to preserve the building.
But the rest of the neighborhood that's the epoch, is the rest of the
yeah,
neighborhood. That's
that-
it. It's not this.
That's what struck me. And also, I'd want to say that these photos, which kind of like, you immediately see the issue when there's
Yeah.
some and so I also wanted to point out that when I did this, I'm like, oh, I get it, because I saw right away their primary emphasis seemed to be the stucco, but the stucco is the thing that I sort of objected to the most.
I wonder
Yeah.
if that guy that Mike Sullivan spoke to us about, that from the state, remember he talked to us?
Skelly.
At the
Chris
last
Scully.
meeting. Chris
Skelly.
Scully, yeah. Now,
Yeah.
he might be someone
Well,
that
except
could help us out.
honestly, I suspect that this is going to just land back in our laps because this is a judgment call, I think. The problem is, because this is already, the argument has been made to us, and I have forgotten now at which point in this process, that this is, the stucco is historically appropriate to the aesthetics of the Portuguese community that converted this building for this use. And that's, a reasonable argument if you look at it from the point of view of, okay, are we attempting to preserve the historical character with respect to the Portuguese immigrant community and that use? If we're looking at historically correct from the aesthetic viewpoint of, okay, this is the district, these are the row houses, obviously this has been modified in ways that take it out of harmony with these row houses, and historical accuracy and preservation means restoring it. That is also 100% a legitimate argument, but they're both, sound arguments that go off on the sense of aesthetics and our values, and I'm not sure that any state authority is going to help us with that.
I
Can
think
we-
the local historic commission should help us with this.
Can we
Not
find
local,
out?
the
yeah.
Holyoke Historic.
That's what I mean, the Holyoke.
Yeah.
Find out if originally that building looked like the other buildings and that they changed it,
I
mean-
think that is what happened, right, Mimi?
This
That
is
they,
Portuguese.
right,
This is New England. That's Portuguese.
so
Right,
that,
but did,
Yeah, I think
was
that it
it
was
all the
changed and
same
they
at
said
one
that, but I'm
time?
not
When they were
sure.
first built, were they all the same? Or was it built so that it looked like that?
No, this was modified from
Okay.
that.
Okay, so it originally looked like, okay.
but it's still,
It appears to me that you can see where the old doorway used to, because, each portico had two entrances. When they removed this portico, you can kind of see where the other windows used to be and the door, and that's only what clued me in, is when I started to look at it, I saw the sort of vestiges of what used to be there. But I'm sure there's some kind of photographic documentation. I'll take this, and we should be able to use the resources of the Holyoke Historical Commission. And maybe this is a good first attempt to see how important and how much they're able to help us on this.
Well,
Because
It'd be great, thank
It'll be
you.
helpful to us to help us make a decision.
Right.
Because we don't know.
And I don't know how much, I think it's a matter of perspective. To which epoch do you restore the building? It seems more clear here maybe than other examples, but there's no reason why we couldn't at that point say, well, let's put the porch back, let's put the dormers back, and let's restore the brick, and then it's more accurately represents its once historic context, and you can still have those functions inside. There's nothing that says that by doing that, all of a sudden, it's
Right.
not the community center.
Yeah, one of the things they said in their application was, this is the way everybody remembers it, like this with the stucco, and we think, but that's not necessarily the priority for historic rehab.
But it might not be eligible for CPA funds in that respect.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this one, certainly, this is historic preservation. This is
Yeah.
returning what it was born from.
Right.
So I'll confer with the Historic Commission and see if I can get some input on that. Maybe somebody has some, or, if I need to, I'll even go to Wisteria's. I know they have a photographic library. Maybe I can find photos there. And
Will you contact Debbie Opperman?
yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, let me know what happens with that.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Anything else on the
Not on
projects?
this.
We're done with that, okay. So, the public hearing plans, we're pretty much, all set
Yeah, I
with that
put
at
in
this
the,
point.
look how short the ad is now. It used to go down to like there, because it's so expensive.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah,
The public notice, not ad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, good job, Marco.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then the other thing is, the agenda, we need to, put that in tonight for, next Wednesday?
What you had down was in-person meetings with CPA applicants. That was what was in the email.
Yeah, meetings with the applicants,
Okay,
and I can email you which applicants, so if we want to add that to the agenda.
I guess you can, and I was gonna, I guess you could, I can probably post it from my computer at home.
Okay.
Yeah, Mondays? No?
I wanna get it online.
Isn't
as soon as
Monday
possible,
okay?
But I'll post it in the clerk's office on Monday, and we'll be within the.
Yeah. Okay, and the only other thing is the acceptance of meetings, minutes from tonight, if they're ready. Even if they're not ready, we still have to list that as one
Oh,
of the items.
and will we hold the meeting here?
We
for
can.
next- Okay. So, again, you said that maybe you could get a projector?
No, I can try to. I can talk to, I mean, maybe, you know if they have one planned? I really don't know.
I don't know, at one point, they seemed to have one, but I wasn't sure whether it had been borrowed from you, actually.
Yeah, no.
If an applicant brought a projector, where would they project the
They
images?
put it right over in that corner there.
You can put it on here and put the screen up
Yeah.
here.
There's a screen?
Yeah, we have a screen.
Oh, okay. So they need to bring a laptop, though, and a projector?
And
Okay.
their presentation.
Okay,
And if I
yeah.
can get a projector, we can tell them we don't, because
Okay.
otherwise maybe we'll be switching projectors.
All right, so I'll let them know that.
Yeah, maybe we
Yeah.
can borrow it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay,
When's our next meeting, guys?
Next Wednesday, I believe.
which is the 30th already, yes. January 30th at
6 o'clock
6
here?
o'clock. You're gonna start the meeting, Mike,
Okay.
okay?
Amy, is it gonna be like 6 again and then 6 again for Wednesday and Friday for next week, or?
Let me just look and see what we had
We
for.
have- Yes, we do have one Friday also, yeah. We do have a meeting Friday
Wait.
at 6.
No, actually, we had scheduled that to start not at 6, but at 6:45.
Which one?
Because you had said,
No, Mike's gonna take the meeting at 6.
but it's already,
Posted like
It's-
that?
Posted at 6:30?
I mean,
But it does-
You mean the
6:45.
applicants aren't coming until 6:45?
The applicants, I think, were told 6:45. I'll
Well-
have to double check.
All right.
But
then
they
We can-
might be okay with coming earlier. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, and we can
Well,
certainly
but we
do
need
other
to
business
know-
ahead of
we
time.
But this is what we had said, that it would
Right,
be.
exactly, you're right. But we need to know tonight, pretty much, if we're gonna start at 6 or 6:45.
We had
because-
said 6:45,
45, so I
I believe,
think
and
we'll
then
have to
Friday
stay.
was at 6.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to stay with that then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 6:45 then. It'll have to be.
Okay,
Unless you wanna come at 6 and talk some more about projects before the applicants come. You know, like anything that we didn't,
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes.
what do you all want to do? 6 o'clock Wednesday?
Yeah, why don't we do
Well,
that, so
that
that we have
depends on-
like at least 15 minutes to.
okay, so the second item will be, further discussion of projects.
What date is that?
Second
Wait, are we
item.
saying to start at 6 then, or 6:30?
If you, well, if you start at 6, you're gonna have a discussion until
I know.
6:45 about projects
Okay,
amongst the committee.
right, so do we want to start at 6 then?
That's the impression I'm
Sure.
getting.
When's your pleasure?
Let's just do it.
Okay,
6 o'clock it is. What is the date, Amy, please?
The 30th.
the 30th.
Wednesday, January 30th.
Okay, 30th.
And then at 6:45, the applicants.
Okay, that
will
makes
be item
sense.
3.
That's good, so if everybody could just read this over, and then we might have more comments, you know,
Gotcha.
or thoughts.
Yeah, and we
Oh,
may
and I
be,
can let you know which applicants, so you might want to
Yes,
focus
please.
specifically
yes.
those on the information, so you come with questions, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, on another, the public hearing is at the Senior Center, February 13th and 15th,
Right,
Correct.
6 o'clock on both nights.
yes.
Okay.
And you're, well, I guess Elaine might be able to come for that,
I
right?
might not, I might skip yoga that night.
And, you know, one thing I propose to do, and I don't know whether people will respond to it or not, but with the agreement of the rest of the committee, I thought I might try to drum up some interest just on social media for having people who are interested in whatever projects we're discussing with applicants come down and join us for these meetings this week. So if members of the public have questions for applicants, we can get those out at that time and the applicants can be prepared to respond to them.
Are you talking?
Oh, you mean so they would then be prepared for the public hearing?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Sure, you can, yeah, whatever you want to drum up, any business, I mean, getting the public involved.
Yeah, because
on
I
social
think,
media, please do that.
yeah, sometimes the public has questions or comments that wouldn't have occurred to us.
Yeah.
And if we can get them involved in any projects that are of particular interest at an early stage of the game, it may just be easier going forward because we'll have that information.
So you're suggesting January
So I'm just
30th?
suggesting, yeah, for this coming week, and nothing may come of it. It may be
No, that's
that,
okay.
How
We
will-
may have an extraordinarily long meeting if it does come to it.
we may, it's
How will
true.
you get out the word? Just tell.
Well, I figured I would just, ping every person I know who was on the original CPA
Yeah. That's a good idea.
referendum committee and tell them these things are happening, and if they know anybody who's
Facebook,
interested,
whatever,
they should come on down.
Yeah.
We want
Don't
company.
Spread the word
Okay.
and let them know that we're having the public hearings.
Yeah, because I am my one concern, and I think it's relatively unlikely, but it could happen, is we get to the public hearings, the public shows up and asks questions we haven't asked, and we thought we could move on and just vote on things, and now new areas are opened up for inquiry, and everything gets slowed down again.
That could happen anyway, that might happen.
It could happen anyway, but I think it is less likely if we can get people involved early.
Yeah,
I just didn't want to start inviting members of the public to come and talk to us and ask questions without making sure everybody else was on board with that.
very good.
Okay.
Okay, any other business for tonight?
On our February 13 and 15 public hearings, are we gonna have any type of, do we need equipment or like any?
It's at the
PowerPoint
senior
present-
center.
Same thing that we had for our, that. the
the
They
same
do have, they
presentation?
have
Yeah.
everything.
No, I
at the
know they
senior
have
center.
everything,
Oh.
but are we bringing anything to present there?
Oh, that's a good
Oh, no.
question, and I can answer. I got in touch with somebody, Ann Lauro, I think she's at Longmeadow, or it was New Bedford, I forget. But anyway, she told me that she could send me a PowerPoint that they use that's very short, just like 5 minutes, to explain to the public about what CPA is. And I think this would, and I could, maybe there's a way I can adapt it, I think that might be a good idea because of the fact that we did do the notices for this meeting, and if we make it a little closer to an introduction, or we have some sort of introduction, then it's a little more similar to the meeting that is supposed to be posted.
Oh, I know what you're saying, yeah.
You know what I'm
Or we could wait, and, because when we do our renewal of our preservation plan, like we're supposed to do in July, we could do that then.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to do it the night of the public hearing. I know that would make it
Yeah.
seem more like it,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
But I also thought it might be good because if people have very obvious questions, we don't want to take, it would be nice if we could just have a very neat way to answer those quickly so we won't have to get bogged down with the obvious kind of questions like, what is the CPA thing? So that was my thought.
If they don't, yeah, I suppose, it's okay with me. I mean, it's not gonna.
I mean, I know
it's
that
not
we
gonna
have to
make or
hear from a
break
lot
us.
of applicants, so if you would
Yeah.
rather not take any time away, we don't have to, but it's just a thought.
It's up to you guys, whatever you think.
She hasn't sent it to me yet, but,
Do we, Madam Chairman, do we have a format by definition for the public hearings? Like, do we have an opening statement? Do we have plan B, plan
Not
C?
at this point, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So I sort of assumed that they would go the way any public hearings that the city council or our various boards conduct.
Okay.
so
Which makes it really
you don't like
informal.
the idea of doing a little intro to CPA?
A 5-minute overview.
I don't think it's gonna matter one way or the other if you do or not, so, I mean, maybe we could ask them, would you like to see an intro? I don't know. the public if they want to see it.
Well, we could see how many people show up, too.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, let's hope people are there first, yeah. Well, hopefully the project people themselves, whoever's presenting their project, I hope they'll get their people to come in and be part of the audience, per se, if you want to call it that. You know,
Oh, I see what you're
like
saying.
Boys and Girls Club, well, I hope they'll have a bunch of people come in.
The
and-
entourage.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, but we should, I mean, as an opening statement, we should say we're here tonight to show the city of Holyoke, the folks here, what we've been doing, what the projects are, and to inform you, let you know what's going on in their status. We're not here to make decisions, we're just to inform the public and just let it go at
You can
that.
do that, Mike, sounds good to me. Write
Because I'm
that
afraid
down.
we're going to be there we'll be there
You
till
can do it,
a
yes.
month later, we'll still be in there. if
And,
we-
you know, the problem with that is it is a public hearing, which means if the public wants to comment,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have to
Well,
let
I
them.
want to try to define it, so we're not
Yeah.
there going over things that we went over.
Well,
So,
Yeah.
can I ask you, so when we do that introduction, that's great. Are we gonna have a PowerPoint to say, these are the people listed that apply, this is what we have been doing as a committee? Or are we just gonna say it like just
No,
verbally?
That's what, I was just thinking,
Yeah.
having a short thing that just explains this comes from this, surcharge, this is what it is, it was voted in at this year, very simple, quick slides so that people know, what the background is.
Madam Chairman, Libby has a good point. I kind of agree with Libby. We should have some, I mean, if the committee so agrees, we should have some type of PowerPoint to say Holyoke Boys Club, Glue
Right.
Tech.
Well, what we can do is pass out, a listing of, just a single thing that lists the projects we're gonna be discussing that night.
That's true.
To pass out.
Right, I think that's
At least
good,
give the folks
because I
something.
think each project will hopefully have some kind of visual,
Right, exactly.
so that we
Okay.
can present.
But at least if we can give the people coming through the door one sheet of paper
Yeah.
that says, these are the projects, these are the proposed amounts they're asking for, and we can take it from there verbally.
yeah,
But
just
at least give them something as a point of reference.
Well, we could give them the regular agenda, although I guess that won't work, because if we're meeting beforehand, oh, no, that's next week, sorry. So we could give them the regular agenda, copies of the agenda.
Let's not make,
do you mean
let's not make
agenda?
it too difficult.
Like, just like we have an agenda here, the agenda would list all the applicants. The agenda that we use for any meeting
Right.
that
but-
Ryan brings.
Right, I like, just something that you gave us tonight, just, this kind
Okay.
of format, but just a short
Okay.
thing of each.
Just a
of each
paragraph.
List.
project,
Yeah,
Okay,
Dollar amount, paragraph, purpose, that's it.
okay,
That would be good.
sure.
Okay,
great.
all right. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job. Keep